So, I know this sounds insane, but I swear on my life, this is 100% true. I don't even know where to begin, but I guess I'll just start from the beginning. Please read the whole thing, because I'm still processing all of it. Part 1. The start of something. Afif never really had a normal relationship with my mom. Ever since I was little, she was always intense, you could say, not in the way that most moms are intense, where they hover over their kids to make sure they're eating right or getting good grades. No, my mom's intensity felt more like pressure. Like, she had this idea in her head of who I was supposed to be, and if I didn't fit that mold, there would be consequences. As I got older, the pressure only increased. By the time I was 16, I couldn't do anything right. The smallest mistake would send her into a fury. If I didn't clean my room exactly the way she wanted, or if I made plans without consulting her first, she'd blow up. But it wasn't just yelling. She'd isolate me from my friends, lock me in my room for days at a time, take away my phone or laptop, and make me feel like I was worthless. It wasn't like I didn't try to be the daughter she wanted. I followed the rules, kept my grades up, didn't rebel or get involved in trouble like some of my friends did. But nothing was ever good enough. I remember one time, I'd come home with straight A's, and she barely acknowledged it. Instead, she spent an hour criticizing my appearance. My clothes were too sloppy, my hair wasn't presentable enough. The constant feeling of never measuring up stuck with me, but it was all I knew. It was the way she loved me, at least that's what I told myself. But there was always an undercurrent of something darker. It wasn't just control, it was obsession. Part 2. The changing started to get worse when I turned 18 and started thinking about college. I wanted to go to a local university and study art, but my mom had a different plan. She wanted me to go to a prestigious school far away, one with a strong business program. She was always pushing me toward something I didn't want. She said I had to be successful, that she had sacrificed so much for me to have a future, and that I owed it to her to follow her dreams, not mine. The more I resisted, the angrier she got. But I didn't give in. I started applying to colleges on my own, telling her I was going to pursue art. And that's when things really started to unravel. She started becoming distant at first, her anger simmering beneath the surface. Then came the guilt trips. I remember one evening she sat me down and cried for hours about how much she had done for me, how she'd given up everything to ensure I'd have opportunities, and how I was throwing it all away. She said that I was selfish, that no one would ever take me seriously as an artist, and that I'd be wasting my life. She told me I'd be living in a cardboard box in a few years if I didn't take her advice. I knew she was scared, maybe for herself, maybe for me, I'm still not sure, but the manipulation was suffocating. She even started pulling little stunts. Like when I'd try to go out with friends, she'd suddenly need me to stay home to help with something that could wait. Or when I'd plan my day, she'd call in the middle of it with some emergency that only needed my attention, even though it was never urgent. The more I resisted, the angrier she got. But I couldn't let her control my future. That's when she started getting erratic. Part 3. The warning signs. Around the time I started packing for college, my mom began doing strange things. She would throw away my art supplies, then accuse me of being irresponsible. She'd tear up my sketches, then tell me I wasn't good enough to be an artist. One night, I came home to find my entire room had been turned upside down. My mom was standing in the middle of it, staring at me like a predator. I remember her eyes. They were wide, too wide, and there was something hollow in them. A coldness that chilled me to my core. I couldn't recognize her anymore. She was this stranger standing in the middle of my room, and I was afraid of what she might do next. She said, "You need to understand something. I know what's best for you. I will make you listen." I froze. I didn't know how to react. I wanted to run, but I didn't want to make it worse. I stood there, rooted to the spot, just staring back at her. I tried to talk, tried to reason with her, but every word I said only seemed to fuel her rage. The argument escalated quickly. Her voice became more shrill, the words harsher, the accusations more bizarre. She claimed I was throwing my future away, that I was destined for failure. Every time I tried to explain myself, she'd cut me off, saying I didn't understand the gravity of the situation. But the scariest part, she started talking about how she had sacrificed so much for me and that she wasn't about to let me ruin everything. I was scared, but I didn't know how to react. I tried to stand my ground, but a part of me was starting to feel like I was going crazy. Was I imagining things? Was I really that difficult? But then, things escalated. Part 4, the breaking point night before I was supposed to leave for college. My mom made me a special dinner. She told me it was to celebrate my new beginning. She smiled in that way she did when everything was perfect. But something in the air felt wrong. The food tasted strange. Too salty, too off. I started to feel lightheaded halfway through the meal. At first, I thought it was just nerves, the stress of the big change, but then I realized I was nauseous. I stumbled to the bathroom and threw up, barely able to catch my breath. My body felt heavy, my limbs weak. It was more than just food poisoning. That's when I saw the small bottle of pills sitting on the counter. My mom was always very meticulous about keeping medication locked away. But these pills? They weren't hers. They didn't look like anything I recognized. I didn't think much about it at first, but as I lay there, feeling dizzy and disoriented, I felt a deep, cold suspicion. I stared at them for a long time. It was like a puzzle piece falling into place. I had to confront her. I had to know. I called out for her, my voice shaky, but she appeared quickly, too quickly. She had that same smile on her face, that same mask of concern. "What's wrong?" she asked, feigning innocence. "You don't look so good." What is this?" I asked, pointing at the bottle. "These aren't yours." She took a step toward me, her eyes widening, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of something strange in her expression. Panic, maybe? It passed so quickly that I almost doubted I'd seen it at all. "Oh, don't worry about that, sweetie. Just some extra medication I was going to take. You're being silly. Just rest now," she said sweetly. But I knew something was wrong. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. She was lying, and I was starting to put the pieces together. The pills weren't for her. They were for me. I confronted her, and she acted all sweet and concerned, like nothing was wrong. She helped me lie down, told me to sleep it off, and insisted I needed rest before the big day. But I knew something was wrong. Something had changed in her, and I had no idea how far she was willing to go to make me listen. Part 5, the unraveling. The next day, I woke up to find my mom already packing my things for the trip. She seemed eerily calm, like nothing had happened. There were no signs of the angry, erratic woman from the night before. I felt a chill run down my spine as she hummed in the kitchen, making breakfast like it was just another day. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into something terrible. I tried to play it off. I kept telling myself that maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I had been stressed. But deep down, I knew I wasn't wrong. Something was building up, something dangerous, and I had no idea how to stop it. When I came downstairs, she handed me a cup of coffee and smiled, but there was a coldness to it. It didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes had that same intensity they always had, like she was watching me for a reason. And that's when it hit me. She had never seen me as her daughter. She had seen me as a project. Something she could control. Something she could mold into what she wanted. She had wanted a success, and if that meant breaking me down, she would. She would tear me apart if it meant making me right. And that's when the real fear set in. I wasn't just dealing with a controlling parent anymore. I was dealing with someone who was willing to destroy me to fulfill their own twisted vision of success. I needed to get out. Part 6, the final struggle. Grabbed my things from the table, pretending to be distracted by the coffee in my hand, trying to give off the appearance of normalcy. I didn't want to show her any more fear than I already had, but deep inside, my instincts were screaming. The chill that had settled in my chest wasn't just from my mother's strange behavior. It was dread, pure dread. Every time I glanced up, her eyes were on me, studying me, calculating something. She didn't even speak as I got ready, though I could tell she was listening intently to every movement I made. I rushed through the process of putting on my shoes, gathering the few things I hadn't packed, hoping it would be enough to just get out of there. But something in the back of my mind told me that she wouldn't let me go. She had already shown what lengths she was willing to go to, and now it felt like she was biding her time. I didn't want to confront her again. I had no idea how much further her madness could stretch, but I knew I couldn't trust her. Not anymore. I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she had already made up her mind she wasn't going to let me leave. The car ride to the airport was almost eerily quiet. She didn't speak a word, and neither did I. It was like there was an invisible wall between us, and I felt more alone than I had ever felt in my life. The more I looked out the window, the more I realized I wasn't sure I could outrun her. She was everywhere, even in my thoughts. She was the one who had been there my entire life, dictating every decision I made, shaping me into someone I didn't even recognize anymore. I had always tried to be good for her, to do what she wanted. But now, looking back, I realized she had never seen me as a person, not as her daughter. She had seen me as a reflection of her own ideals, her desires. If I didn't meet those, I wasn't worth her love. As we approached the airport, I tried to plan my escape in my head. I would get my ticket, go through security, and be gone. As far as I could run, as far as I could hide. I would escape to that small corner of the world where I could breathe, where I could be myself without the shadow of her obsession hanging over me. But the moment we pulled up to the drop-off lane, something inside me froze. I saw the way she looked at me. It wasn't a loving gaze anymore. It was cold, calculating. I wasn't just her daughter anymore. I was an obstacle to be dealt with. "You know, I've done everything for you," she said, breaking the silence in a voice that wasn't hers. The softness was gone, replaced by an edge that made my stomach turn. "Everything." I turned to face her. Her hands gripped the steering wheel with a white-knuckled intensity, her eyes now locked on mine. For the first time, I saw the rage that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. It was no longer hidden behind guilt trips and manipulation. It was raw. It was uncontrollable. "I've sacrificed so much," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I gave up everything for you. Everything. And you are just going to throw it all away." Her hands shook, and for a moment, I thought she might lash out at me physically. I braced myself, prepared for whatever was coming next. But then she did something unexpected. She reached into her bag, pulling out that same small bottle of pills I had seen the night before. My heart dropped. She held the bottle up to me, the label almost gleaming in the sunlight. "You're so ungrateful, aren't you?" she said. "You can't see that I'm only trying to help you. This is for your own good." I didn't understand. My mind couldn't process what was happening. I had to get away from her. I had to leave. "Mom," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Please, I just need to go. Please let me go." But she didn't let me go. Instead, she smiled, that eerie, haunting smile that made my blood run cold. "You'll thank me later," she said, so calmly, so matter-of-factly. "You'll understand why I had to do this." I didn't know what she meant, but in that moment, I realized how deep the hole had gotten. There was no turning back. The woman in front of me wasn't the mother I had once known. She was someone else now, someone I didn't recognize. Someone who would destroy me if it meant she could control me. And then it happened. In one swift movement, my mother opened the bottle and poured a small handful of pills into her palm. Her eyes were wide, and for a moment, I saw something desperate in them. "I'm doing this because I love you," she said, almost pleading. "You're going to thank me. You'll see." I panicked. My body reacted before my brain could catch up. I lunged for the door handle, desperate to get out, but it was locked. She had locked the door. I was trapped. "You can't leave," she said, her voice cold, her smile widening into something far too sinister. "Not now. Not ever." I tried again to open the door, my fingers slick with sweat as I fumbled for the handle. But my mother was too quick. She grabbed my wrist, holding me in place with an unnatural strength. "No," she hissed. "You're going to listen to me. You're going to stay. I'll make you understand." The pills were still in her hand. I could see them clearly now. They weren't just any pills. They were sedatives. The kind that would knock you out. The kind that would leave you vulnerable and defenseless. My heart raced, and my mind spun. I realized in that instant that she was trying to drug me. She was trying to make me so weak that I wouldn't be able to fight her anymore. That I would do whatever she wanted. In that split second, everything changed. I gathered every ounce of strength I had left and yanked the door handle with all my might. It gave way. I broke free. I didn't look back. I ran. I didn't care who saw me. I didn't care if she chased me. I just needed to get away. The airport was only a few hundred feet away, but it felt like miles. My legs burned as I sprinted, the adrenaline in my veins giving me the strength to keep going. I didn't stop until I was inside the airport. I didn't stop until I was at the check-in counter, begging for a ticket on the earliest flight out of there. They must have seen the panic in my eyes because they didn't ask any questions. They just handed me a ticket. I couldn't hear anything. My heart was pounding so loudly in my ears. I felt like I was suffocating, like the world was closing in on me. I made it onto the plane. I made it as far away as I could get. Part 7. The Aftermath. The flight was a blur. I don't remember much about it. My mind was still reeling from the events of the morning. My mom's words echoed in my head, "You'll thank me later." What had she meant by that? What was she going to do if I hadn't run? I couldn't stop thinking about what she might have planned. I had always assumed she was just controlling, but this was something else. This was dangerous. When I finally landed, I found a place to stay with a friend who had no idea what had been happening. I couldn't talk about it. Not yet. I needed time to process everything, to figure out what to do next. But that night, after I had finally settled in and felt safe, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. "I've given you everything, and this is how you repay me. You'll never escape me." That was the first of many messages. Part 8. Moving forward. It's been months now since I left. My mom tried to contact me through various channels. At first, I ignored her. I blocked her numbers. I changed my email, but the messages kept coming. Some were pleading, others were angry. She promised that I would regret abandoning her. She promised that I would never be happy without her. But I wasn't going back. Not this time. I don't know where she is now. But I do know one thing. I'm never going to let her control me again. I've started therapy, and I'm slowly rebuilding my life. It's hard, but I'm free. I can breathe again. If you take anything from this, it's this. Never let anyone tell you who you are supposed to be. Not even your own mother. She doesn't own you. She never did.